My name is Craig Rosen, and I want to welcome you to the EnergySmart Education Professional Development. This is a series of 3 professional development evenings that we're holding. We're really excited to be able to offer this virtually for all of us who are participating today, over 100 strong. So this is really exciting to have so many of you joining us after school today. We are here, and the team from DRI are here, and you'll be hearing from a bunch of us throughout the day. If you have questions or problems throughout this Zoom call, make sure to reach out to Mackenzie. You'll see her by her first name, Mackenzie. You can chat with her, and she can help answer your questions. And also, she'll be taking questions for our speaker today. So as you go through this hour, if you want to ask questions of our speaker, definitely send them to Mackenzie's way, and she will be the one addressing all the questions. So again, it's Mackenzie. At the end of our program today, we will be holding a raffle. Yay, everybody likes raffles, right? Oh yeah. Oh yeah, this is good. This is good, cold hard cash, right? So a gift certificate to Amazon will be raffled off at the end of the hour today. So make sure you stick on board. We're also going to be sharing a survey that we'd ask you to fill out at the end of the day, so we can kind of measure our progress and share with our funders how we're doing. Speaking of funders, we want to thank our sponsors, NV Energy and Southwest Gas, who have been longtime sponsors of Desert Research Institute Science Alive program, and they have jointly created the EnergySmart Education Program. So we are very happy and thankful to them. Now, just a show of hands or a quick nod in the chat, how many of you is this the very first DRI training you've been at? Let's see, I'm seeing a lot of hands and head nods. Chats, a lot of people saying first one, never been here before. Well, again, welcome. Desert Research Institute is part of the Nevada System of Higher Education. We have 2 campuses, one in Reno and one in Las Vegas. At our research institute, we have close to 500 staff people who are doing research on a number of different topics, mostly environmental topics. Science topics, air, land, life, water, renewable energy, climate change, and health as well. A variety of topics that we engage in. And it's very, people get us confused, right? People say, oh, Desert Research Institute, what do you research? And people think, oh, the desert. Well, yes, we do, but we also research many other places. In fact, we have researchers all over the globe doing research, and it's some even say it's we're better known in Ghana than we are here in our own home state of Nevada. So hopefully you do know about us and you are familiar with the work that we do. And you are here today because of that. So we have an Office of Education operated out of Desert Research Institute. We call ourselves Science Alive. And our job here is to really give you the tools and resources you need to bring science to life in your classroom. And that's why we're here today, because we want to make sure that you have the most up-to-date information and hear from some of our researchers who are doing some amazing work in the field. So we want to hear and see who is here. So we're going to launch a few polls. So Chelsea, I'm going to ask you to launch our very first poll of the afternoon. We want to get to know you. So what grades do you teach or work with? A few more people coming in, and let's close that poll and share the results. So it looks as though a majority of you here are with 3rd through 5th grade. So it's great to see you. And then followed by our actually our high school group, which is great to see you, 28 of you strong, which is really awesome. Middle school teachers, we have some informal educators and family education as well. So it's welcome. It's great to see so many of you here from K through Gray. Let's move on to our next poll. Where in Nevada are you? Where do you work? A lot more of you answering here. This is great. Let's end our poll and share the results. Hey, there's 2 of you from our rural counties. This is great. We love to have you here. So our rural friends, maybe you can type in the chat box where you're from in the rurals. It's great to see some of our rural friends who are here as well. And Northwest, you're represented as well, which is great. So yay, somebody from Pahrump and Elko. So great to see you guys here, Layla and Cindy. All right, let's go to our third poll, Chelsea. Okay, let's close this poll. So what's your energy knowledge? About 50% of you are beginners in energy education. So this is great. It's going to be a nice little introduction for what we have in store for you today. Some of you are veterans, so we'd love to hear from you definitely in day 3 at how you bring energy alive in your classroom. And there are a few experts here, so make yourselves known because we're going to be asking of you. And somebody is here just because they need a PD credit. All right, we get it. We get it. All right, let's move on to our last poll. All right, let's share our results. So today is Monday, just letting you all know it is Monday. 23% of you just didn't know that. It's okay. It's perfectly acceptable. We understand. And I'm really glad to hear that 61% of you are kind of enjoying or at least getting the hang of the online learning thing. It's a challenge, I must say, from both angles, right? As a parent and as a teacher. I live with it every day, and God bless you all for doing the work you're doing. So thank you so much for participating in these polls. We're going to move on and kind of get us started in where we're at. So thanks, Chelsea, for sharing those. All right. So this 3-part training today, we're going to kind of give you the problem. Today, we're going to set up the problem. What is this? Why are we studying energy? And we're gonna welcome a climate scientist from DRI to kind of set up our problem for us. Tomorrow, when we move into the next phase, we're going to hear from our energy providers. So, all right, so we have the problem. So what are the solutions? What is our energy companies doing? What is our state doing to help combat climate change in terms of the energy landscape? And the third day is then going to be putting it into practice. So we have the problem, we have the solutions. Now, how do we teach it? And how do we bring it alive in our classroom? So that's kind of the progression of our 3 days that we thought would be most valuable for us. And so today, let's start with the problem. And the problem isn't our researcher, the problem is climate change, of course. So I'd like to welcome you, welcome Dan McEvoy to our teacher training today. Dan is a climate researcher at Desert Research Institute. So Dan, welcome, and maybe you could tell our audience a little bit about yourself and how you came to DRI.
Yeah, sure. Well, first, I just want to say thank you. I'm really excited to be here and be doing this today and see so many people on here. This is fantastic. So yeah, I'll just tell you a little bit about, I guess, my science story about how I got into science and came to DRI. So I've been interested in science pretty much my whole life, and that led me, I grew up in Pennsylvania and New York on the East Coast, and that led me to pursue a bachelor's degree in environmental science in Plattsburgh State University in upstate New York. Now, at that point in my life, I never thought about myself being a climate scientist. It never really crossed my mind. I thought much more about environmental engineering or biological sciences or something like that. But it was also around that time I started spending a lot more time in the mountains. I've always liked the outdoors, but I got really into skiing and rock climbing and hiking and understanding how important the weather is to have a good day in the mountains. You really got to kind of understand the weather. And so that's when I really first became interested in weather and climate. So after that, I actually moved to Lake Tahoe, and I spent a few years ski bumming around Lake Tahoe to spend as much time as I possibly could in the mountains. And I did, and I don't regret it. And it was a lot of fun. And that's when I really started to really take interest in the weather patterns and what that meant for snowfall and how that might compare to past years and that sort of thing, and getting into climate. And so after a few years that, I actually got a job environmental consulting in Truckee, California. And the main thing that we were doing there was stormwater collection. And so a big part of my job was actually tracking storms, so we knew when to go out and sample at the right times. And so that's when I really got introduced to kind of data and weather data and climate data. And I kind of started becoming obsessed with it after that, and kind of became this armchair amateur meteorologist. And then came the Great Recession, and I lost my job there in the consulting company. And that's when I decided I wanted to pursue graduate school in atmospheric science. And so that's when I moved to Reno, and I started in the atmospheric science program at UNR, and was lucky enough to get a research assistantship at the Desert Research Institute, and that was in 2010. And I've been at DRI ever since. I finished my PhD in 2015, and I've primarily been working on drought research related to water resources and mountain hydroclimatology, and a little bit more recently, I've been focusing on the connections between drought and wildfire and climate change, and sort of how that might impact things going into the future. Yeah, and so hopefully today I can give you all an overview of climate change in general and what it means for Nevada.
So wait, Dan, you're here to tell us that climate is actually changing?
Believe it or not, it is. It's changing very much. I'd like to provide you some evidence of that.
Excellent. Well, I look forward to seeing your presentation, and we're going to let you take it away. And friends, I remind you that if you have a question for Dan throughout his presentation, please direct message it right over to Mackenzie. So she'll be asking and moderating that question.
All right. So let's see. Okay, can I get a confirmation, Craig, that you're seeing my full screen here?
You're good to go.
All right. So yeah, I'm gonna kind of cover what we were just talking about. I mentioned I like to spend a lot of time in the mountains, and so this is a picture from last spring up in the Mount Rose Wilderness. Really like spending time in the snow, and it's a beautiful place we have. I'm lucky to live here. Let's see next. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to do was mention the Western Regional Climate Center and how that relates to the Desert Research Institute. And so this map here is showing there are 6 of these regional climate centers that NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, funds. And one of them, for the whole Western region, is at the Desert. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, where was I? So yeah, the Western Regional Climate Center is housed at DRI. And so my role there is I serve as the regional climatologist. And so aside from the pure research components, my other hat that I wear is more about the applied side of climate, and more specifically climate data. So we have the WRCC mission over here on the left. And a lot about that is kind of making sure folks have access to this historical weather and climate data that basically support the evidence for tracking climate change, and also for all sorts of different uses. But I did want to mention that this is my other role at the Desert Research Institute, is with the WRCC. So before we get into talking about climate change in Nevada, I want to just cover the basics of global climate change and why and how the planet is warming. And so I really like this animation here, and it kind of shows the basics of the greenhouse effect and how we have our atmosphere, which extends several thousand miles above the surface, and it acts as this giant greenhouse, and sunlight comes down through the atmosphere, and some of it gets absorbed, some of it reflects back off of the surface. At the same time, we also have all these gases within the atmosphere, and these greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide, methane, water vapor, and those gases, they absorb some of the sunlight and then they re-emit it back into within the atmosphere, and so that acts to warm the planet. And so the more of these greenhouse gases we have within our atmosphere, the more the planet will keep warming. And the one that's really having the biggest impact on warming the planet is carbon dioxide. There are these other greenhouse gases that are important, but in terms of the temperature changes, carbon dioxide is having the biggest impact. And so we can talk a little bit about how carbon dioxide has changed over the years. And so this is a really interesting graph from NASA. This actually shows a reconstruction of atmospheric carbon dioxide concentrations going back about 800,000 years. You might wonder how they have information that far back. And so this is done through sampling of ice cores. And basically you core down deep into ice that has been around for thousands and thousands of years, and you can trace the levels of carbon dioxide that were in the atmosphere. And so what we see here is, if we go backwards on the left, so we're at 8,000 years and 800,000 years at the past, and then as we go through time to the right, we have our current values. And so we see some what we call natural variability here. We have ups and downs, and it's kind of cyclic and looks fairly natural until about the start of the Industrial Revolution. And then we see this spike in the carbon dioxide concentrations, and see this white arrow that shows our current levels. And so this is the part that's a bit alarming, and that in all this time we have never been above this line in carbon dioxide concentrations, and all of a sudden in the last 100 or 150 years or so, we've spiked to these very high levels above 400 parts per million. And so then we move into how that impacts our changing climate, and the one that we talk about the most is the changing temperatures and rising temperatures. And the question that comes up very often, and I think it's for good reason, is how do we know what's causing the temperature increases? How do we know it's not solar cycles or volcanoes or some other natural phenomena or other human caused things? How do we know what it is? And so this next series of graphs I'm going to show, and let me sort of explain this here. So this is going through time on the left at 1880, going through 2005. And this gray line I'm going to be showing on each graph is the change in temperature over time. And so we kind of had this somewhat steady temperature, and then over the last 50 or so years, we've seen the steadily increase in the global air temperature over time. And what we can then do is look at the contributions of other natural and human caused things and how that impacts temperature changes. And so this first one that I'm showing here is changes in the Earth's orbit through the Earth's tilt and how it rotates. And so this orange line here is showing basically kind of steady around this middle line, which basically indicates that it's having very little to no change or no impact on the change of the Earth's temperature. So the closer this orange line is to the temperature line indicates that it's one of the main drivers of that change in temperature. And so now on to the next one. This one is probably one of the most common ones that comes up, and it's one of the most common arguments by climate change skeptics or deniers about climate change. And is it the sun and is it solar cycles? There's lots of variability in the sun and the temperature, and there are solar cycles, but we see a very similar thing here where the contribution of solar activity, this yellow line, is having very little impact on the change of temperature over time. And so the next one I'm showing here is volcanoes. And so volcanoes emit a lot of gases into the atmosphere, and the red line is showing the contribution of volcanic activity to temperature over time. And we actually see that these big spikes, when there are large volcanic eruptions, actually act to cool the atmosphere rather than warm the atmosphere, because we have the red line dropping below this middle line here, indicating a negative impact on the changing temperatures. So it's not volcanic activity. So then we move into the human factors, and I have several other lines on here. We still have the temperature line that I'm showing. This one up top is the greenhouse gases that I was talking about earlier. And then on the bottom, we have ozone pollution, land use changes like farming, clear cutting, and that sort of thing, and then aerosol pollution. And so what we see here is that the greenhouse gas line is actually above the temperature line, indicating that it has a very positive feedback on increasing the temperatures of the global temperatures. And when we look at the other human cause factors, they're basically having little change or negative, so decreases in temperature due to these changes, like aerosols. And so the picture is pretty clear from this type of analysis that shows that it is the greenhouse gases and carbon dioxide that are changing our temperature and causing those rises in temperature. So now we can move from global climate change down to more local climate change in Nevada. And so this is where a lot of our work at the Western Regional Climate Center comes in. And so what I'm showing here, this is from a tool that we developed at the WRCC called the Nevada Climate Tracker. And this is public domain, anyone can access this. And what I'm showing here is, starting on the left in 1895, how the average daytime maximum temperature each year has changed through 2019. And these are the anomalies. So these are the departures from the average period, which is 1981 to 2010. Any of the red bars show years that had higher than average daytime maximum temperatures. Any of the blue bars show cooler than average daytime maximum temperatures. And when you first look at this, it doesn't look quite like the temperature graph I showed in the other plots, where we had this steadily increasing since about 1950 or so. We actually see the warmest year on record here was in 1934, which was a warm, dry period during the Dust Bowl era there. And we have had a lot of warmer years recently, and we've had some trending upward since about 1980, but it's not that abrupt rise, continuous change since about 1950 or so. However, we also have to consider the overnight low temperatures and not just the daytime high temperatures. And so this is the same graph now, except we're looking at the minimum temperatures instead of the maximum temperatures. And this is where a lot of the strong climate change signal in temperature is showing up, is in the overnight low temperatures. So now we see, since about 1950, this black line here has been steadily increasing, and nearly all of the red bars occur after 1980, and the warmest years have occurred within the last 5 to 10 years. The warmest year on record here is 2015. And so we need to not only look at the average temperature, but also the minimum and the maximum temperatures. So part of this is due to things like urbanization. So around Reno and Las Vegas, those places have warmed a lot due to more urbanization, more concrete. But there's also a component to that is separate from the urbanization, which is, again, the greenhouse gases, which tend to keep those overnight low temperatures warmer than they were in the past. And precipitation, of course, is important for drought and snowpack and water supply. And so this is a similar graphic now, where any of the green bars show years where we had above average precipitation, and any of the browns show below average precipitation. And we don't see a whole lot of trend one way or another here. We've had cycles of wet years, we've had cycles of dry years. The early 80s had some of our wettest years on record. Just recently, as 2019, we had a very wet year. And so there's no real trend one way or the other, which is different than temperature. And so we have to account for how the increasing temperature is going to impact changes in both dry periods and wet periods, because precipitation does not appear to be changing all that much. So I just covered basically the historical data on climate change, what we've already observed in the past. The whole other part of climate science is looking at the future projections of climate change. And so a common way to do that is looking at global climate models, which project things like temperature and precipitation out to the end of the 21st century. And I wanted to show a few graphs, and I wanted to highlight this tool here. It's called the Northwest Climate Toolbox, and it has this climate mapper tool where you can very easily make these graphs on your own and share them with students or for projects or that sort of thing. And so what I'm showing here are two temperature graphs, and show these are annual temperatures, and this is how much they could possibly change from the 1971 to 2000 average to the 2040 to 2069 average, which is really not that far away. And so another thing that's used in climate change projections is differing greenhouse gas emissions. And so this is where it comes in, what can we do? And what if we do something about climate change? And what if we reduce our greenhouse gas emissions? And so there's this RCP 4.5 scenario, which basically says that we are going to do something about greenhouse gas emissions, and that they will continue to increase until about 2040 and then start declining because we're working to reduce those emissions. And then the one on the right is the RCP 8.5, which basically says we're not going to do anything, and these greenhouse gas emissions are just going to continue to rise through the end of the 21st century. And so both of these scenarios depict quite a bit of warming in Nevada either way. And I put a little marker here around the Reno area where we would see if we start reducing greenhouse gas emissions by mid-century, we could see about a 4.3 degree Fahrenheit increase in annual temperature. And that goes up quite a bit to close to 6 degrees if we don't change those emissions. And there are some other things you can look at instead of just the annual temperatures. And so we can look at things like extreme heat. And so this one on the left is showing the projected of change in the number of days with a heat index greater than 90 degrees Fahrenheit. So how it could change from 1971 to 2000 average, again to that middle of the century average. And so we see large increases in these heat extremes, about nearly 40 more days around Reno with a heat index of 90 degrees. And this is with the RCP 8.5 scenario. So if we do something about the emissions, it will be quite a bit less than that. And the other one here on the right is related to agriculture and the length of the growing season. And so this is one thing that has the potential to actually in some way be a positive impact for farming, is if we have a longer growing season, more time to grow crops. And so this shows an increase in the growing season by also about 40 days by mid-century due to the warming temperatures. So those are some of the basics of how the projections look going into the future. So I just wanted to outline some of the the more kind of Nevada-centric impacts that we could see from climate change. And human health impacts is a really big one. And so I kind of highlighted two things here that could have big human health impacts. One is related to wildfires. And so with wildfire, what we can see from climate change, the one thing that's pretty clear is if we continue to warm in the future, that will dry out the vegetation more quickly that is available to burn and make it more flammable. And so the fires we do get can spread more rapidly and grow bigger, not unlike what we saw and are currently seeing this fire season. And so this map here is the air quality index for, I think this is from mid-September. And everyone who's been around the West Coast this summer has experienced this poor air quality. And so air quality impacts are one. This is a map showing the dense smoke advisories. This was from mid-September, up and down Northwest Nevada. I know even down into Southern Nevada, they had poor air quality from the fires in California. And then another one is just extreme heat impacts. Extreme heat and high temperatures can be dangerous to small children, to the elderly. You can dehydrate quicker. And then there's also people that homeless that are living outside. And then there's also people that don't have air conditioning. And so these are all things that will escalate with more extreme heat impacts, and impacts to the energy sector. And this is kind of interesting. We saw this summer when we had a very strong heat wave earlier in the summer. NV Energy was asking people to conserve energy during this heat wave, to turn your air conditioning down, to only use electric when you need to during certain times of the day. And so we could expect more of this as we go into the future, and potentially even something like rolling blackouts like California has had to implement because of the high demand on the energy grid due to these increased temperatures and air conditioning needs and that sort of thing. I mentioned agriculture already, and there's some interesting things, both potentially positive and negative, related to agriculture. And even though Nevada is a desert, the climate in the summer is great for growing if we have the water available. And so these two images are from Lovelock, Nevada, which is a pretty big ag area in northern Nevada. And so the one on the left is from the summer of 2015, and the one on the right is from 2019. And so this area relies completely on surface water to irrigate crops. And so that is basically snowmelt and stream flow that gets piped in that they can use to water their crops with. And so this was the fourth year of a very bad drought in this area in 2015. And they were allocated zero surface water. And this essentially, destroyed their whole season of farming due to not having any water. And you can see how brown the fields look. And this drought was a very dry one because of a lack of precipitation, but it was made even worse because of the extreme heat. Now on the right is what more of a typical summer looks like when there is enough water, like last summer, and you can see all the green fields. And so there's definitely some potential negative impacts for agriculture. Higher water demand during the peak growing season, as I mentioned, more droughts and less available surface water, and the heat stress on crops. But there is also some potential positive impacts, longer growing season, and also new crop varieties that couldn't be grown in cooler climates and shorter growing seasons before. And the last one I want to cover, there definitely are other types of impacts, but I just wanted to cover a few today, is recreation and tourism. So this is a picture I took from New Year's Day in 2018 at about 8,000 feet at Mount Rose ski area. And so in January at this elevation, there should be snow everywhere. And so you see off to the right in the shaded areas, there is some snow, but right in front of me, there's no snow on the ground. And so this was what we refer to as a snow drought year. And so this is a new area of research, and this is something that myself and others at DRI have been working on. And it's just the idea that as we get into a warmer climate, and precipitation may not change that much, or we may get more precipitation. And because it's warmer, it's going to fall as more rain and less snow in the mountains. And so particularly in Northwest Nevada around the Reno Tahoe area, the tourism and recreation industry is huge for skiing and other winter sports and just holiday tourism around that time. And so this map is showing projected changes in basically decreasing snowpack substantially. And some models show, below 6,000 feet, by the end of the century, there might not be any snow in parts of the Sierra Nevada. And so that is yet another impact of climate change. And yeah, finally, I just wanted to, I think this presentation will be available to you, but share some links on where you can find some of this stuff. The top here is kind of basically links to learn about climate change. There's some specific ones for teachers. There's this YouTube series run by through PBS, made by Catherine Hayhoe, who's a climate scientist. It's called Global Weirding. I highly recommend it. She's an excellent climate science communicator, and she does a great job explaining some of these complicated processes about climate change in very easy to understand terms, and it could be good for classes as well. And then there's the data side of it. These are some of the links to some of the maps and time series stuff I was showing for the historical data, and then also for the future climate projections. And I do just want to mention some of these can be, if you're not like myself who's looking at this stuff every day for their job, it could be challenging to learn how to use these tools. And so if there is interest, we do, as part of my work at the Western Regional Climate Center, we like to offer, make ourselves available to kind of help people learn how to use these tools, a day-long training or something like that. So I just want to make that known that you can contact me if you have any interest in that. And I think that was all I had. And so I will turn it back over to Craig or Mackenzie. And
we're going to turn it over to Mackenzie. Thank you, Dan, so much for that presentation. Again, we're going to be making this presentation available to everybody. And I know a lot of you have been asking questions, and Mackenzie, you've been fielding them. I'm sure your inbox is flooded with questions for Dan, so I'm going to let you jump right in.
Awesome. Thanks, Craig. Dan, for that really comprehensive overview of climate change, specifically in our state. So I have a ton of questions, both from the chat and from prior to this session today. Some of you had already burning questions when you signed up for the workshop, so I'm not sure if we'll get through all of them. But I'm gonna start you off with a softball or a hardball, not sure which one it is. Can you share your personal views on global warming?
Yes, I can. And I will just say that to me, it's not a personal view to me. Based on all the evidence that's out there, some of what I just shown, there's a ton more out there to support this. To me, you either accept the evidence or you don't. And so I don't have a belief or an opinion on global warming. I accept that it's happening, and I'm working to educate others to kind of make them aware of what's happening, and just try to get people to support the science behind climate change.
So a follow-up question to that. We had a few folks ask, what's the best way to respond to either students or their peers or colleagues who are, as you coined them, climate deniers? So you said point them to the research. What are maybe some good resources to point people to if they are questioning the legitimacy of your work?
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why I went through that series of graphs that kind of showed, how we know that is what's causing climate change, and that it is nearly all human caused from these greenhouse gas emissions. That series of graphs is publicly available. It was published in Bloomberg, but the data comes from peer-reviewed scientific research. And so I just, I shared a bunch of links there at the end on learning about climate change. And so there's some there, these are from NASA scientists that make careers out of kind of understanding climate change and modeling climate change. And so I just highly recommend trying to educate folks who are denying it for whatever reason. And instead of, arguing with someone, point them in another direction and tell them, well, the facts are here, and there's lots of support. Nearly the entire scientific community agrees on these facts. So.
Awesome. Thank you for that advice. So we had someone ask in our chat box, why is it called greenhouse gases and what creates them?
Yeah, so the term greenhouse gas, I guess I don't know the full history on that, but it's about how the gases act to absorb energy and radiate it and emit it back into the atmosphere and towards the surface. And so it's very much similar to the way plants can grow much quicker in a cold environment in a greenhouse, as opposed to if they were, in their natural environment with cooler temperatures. And so, as I mentioned, our natural atmosphere is that said greenhouse. That is basically the top of the greenhouse, is the top of our atmosphere. And so all these gases within our atmosphere are then the greenhouse gases that absorb and re-emit this energy. And so I mentioned carbon dioxide, that is a natural element in our atmosphere, but fossil fuel burning is really the biggest contributor to man-made greenhouse gases. There's also water vapor is a greenhouse gas which occurs naturally in our atmosphere. Methane is another big one, and so agriculture is a big contributor to emitting methane as a greenhouse gas into the atmosphere. And so all these gases occur naturally, but there's also human elements that greatly increase the amount that's being put into the atmosphere.
Great, thank you. So this question is really timely and was asking about our current situation being in a global pandemic. So a lot less people on the road, a lot less cars emitting fumes. Can you speak to that at all? Do climatologists think that will have any long-term impact in some of these trends that you're seeing, or is this just a blip in time?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good question, and I've heard that come up before. I can't personally speak to any research that I've done on it, and from what I've heard, it seems like that locally in some places it definitely has reduced some of the emissions into the atmosphere, but that is not projected to stay that way. We are really hoping that we won't be in this pandemic forever, and I think as soon as we get back to whatever normal is, that the trend will continue. And it is in the amount of greenhouse gases that have already been emitted and the change in carbon dioxide that we've already seen, it is pretty much a blip right now. But it is still good to have that reduction, even if it's for a small period of time.
Thank you. So this question is about human life. So you talked a bit about the diminishing air quality here in Nevada that we're seeing due to all these wildfires, extreme heats during our summer months, and that impact that it's going to have on ag. Can you talk a little bit more about how human life will be impacted either here in Nevada or globally?
Maybe a little bit. So yeah, I covered some of what I thought were some of the biggest impacts to human life, locally in Nevada. So there are other parts of the globe where, as I mentioned, around Nevada, precipitation hasn't changed much, and it's projected to maybe even increase, whereas other parts of the globe, the projections point to sharply declining precipitation, so much more frequency of severe droughts. And so places like third world countries where they already have famine and food shortages due to droughts, that could definitely increase, and there could be more food insecurity in places around the globe. The heat is really a big thing in densely populated areas. India is one example. Some of the big cities in India where they're already seeing really big impacts from extreme heat waves on human health. And the fires are definitely not just a local thing to the West Coast of the United States. That's happening around the globe as well. We saw Australia, I believe that was this year. It seems like so long ago, but in our winter and their summer this year, they had an extreme wildfire year as well. And so, these same kind of impacts, that there's probably other different local impacts depending on where you are, but what I talked about can really be extended to many areas around the globe in terms of human impacts.
Great, thank you. So we got a couple questions that are related to policy, and I'll throw them at you. If you can't speak to them, that's totally okay. I just wanted to recognize that people are interested in that. The first being related to our election cycle this year, and specifically to question 6 about renewable energy sources. So this question was about basically enforcement. Is there any way to hold utility companies accountable? And what role do scientists such as yourself have in that, if any?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak to holding utility companies accountable, but it really comes down to getting this information to our government and getting them to accept, again, not believe, but accept climate change and try to integrate it into their policy. And so while, I do my work at DRI as a scientist, in the end, we want that to translate up higher to the government. For example, California has had a state climate change assessment. I think they're on their 4th one now. And what comes out of the science that comes out of that goes directly into making some of their policies regarding energy and climate change. We're in the process right now of trying to create the first Nevada climate change assessment, which would be a similar thing where we take the science to support all this and translate that into government policy. And so, I hate to say it, but Nevada, in terms of government and policy on climate change, is far behind a lot of other states. And so we're trying to play catch up here now. And yeah, it's extremely important that this translates outside of the scientific community and into government.
Thank you. This other question related to government is, how do policies at local, regional, state levels impact your research?
I'm not sure I could speak to that too much. I don't know if I've had any sort of direct impacts of government policy on my research. I will say at the start of this current administration, there were definitely big proposed budget cuts to the NOAA regional climate centers, which is part of the federal budget. That seemed to be a lot of talk, and that those budget cuts were proposed, but they didn't actually happen. And so we got to keep our budget for the regional climate centers. So I guess I would say from my experience so far, it's been the federal government and their policies that have the potential to impact funding to scientific research.
All right, that's all my policy questions. I'll move on from that from now. So we have just a few minutes left. Craig, do we have time for 2 more questions?
Yeah, at least we have at least 2 more. Go for it.
Okay, perfect. All right, so I'm going in the chat box. We have someone asking, have the fires in the Amazon affected El Nino or La Nina, which impacts the climate on the West Coast?
I cannot answer that question. I would agree that ENSO and El Nino and La Nina do affect our climate here, but I do not know about the connection to the Amazon fires.
You can't know it all, so that is fine. Great, we have another question saying, do you know of any climate research using dendrochronology? They are thinking specifically of the bristlecone pine trees in Nevada.
Yes, definitely. So I personally haven't been involved in that research, but there are many at DRI who have been. And it's a huge asset to climate science. So basically where the realm that I work in is mostly in our instrumental observations. So basically weather station observations, which if we're lucky, go back 100, 150 years. And so with the dendrochronology, basically taking cores from trees or sediment from lake shores, you can extend that back hundreds or even thousands of years to get estimates of what our climate was like before the instrumental record. And so that research is essential to understanding our long-term climate. What I showed, beginning in 1900 is such a small period of time relative to some of the climate records we have from dendrochronology.
Great. We have a question about whether or not the US can do anything about the greenhouse gas emissions caused by China and India. How do we have control over other countries if they choose not to cooperate with international agreements?
Yeah, I think that's another one that I'd have to probably ask a politician about, because I don't think I can answer that question.
That was a big one.
Dan, you just answered it just like a politician, so there you go.
I defer.
I have a couple more that were sent in ahead of time I want to get to. One of just being, sometimes climate change talk, especially when we're talking with our students, can be really gloom and doom. And we always want to convey some sort of message about what are some tangible actions that they can take. We want there to be some hope when they walk out of a classroom. So can you speak to that at all, about what can individuals do or students in order to feel like they're making a positive impact instead of a negative one?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It really feels like your individual contributions sometimes can get lost and not matter at all. But I would say that they do matter. You might not see that right away, but I'd just say first, continue your individual contributions and trying to reduce your carbon footprint. But the more important thing, as I mentioned, was we need to get this information into our local and up to national government. And so I know not everyone is always old enough, but vote. You need to vote and support these policies that that come up in the elections, and that's one of the biggest things you can do is if you are of voting age. Yeah, I'd say just try to educate others and continue making your small contributions as much as you can.
Awesome, thank you. And the last one I'll end on, I know we're not getting to every single question, but the last one is a lot of people had asked beforehand about resources. So that slide that you included in your presentation is going to be really key for helping teachers being able to bring some of this real-time data into their classroom. Is there anything in particular on that list, or maybe that you didn't include, a resource, whether that be a website, a book, an article, or anything? I know not any one thing can tell the whole story, but people were really curious with what are the must reads, the must sees that they really need to make sure that they educate themselves on so they can help field questions from their students.
Yeah, there is a lot out there, and what I put on that slide was just a small glimpse of what's available. I really recommend trying to watch some of those global weirding episodes that are aired on PBS by Dr. Catherine Hayhoe. Yeah, she just does such a good job. There's different elements of climate change that are covered. It's not just the basics of what is climate change. And so if there's one on there, I would highly recommend those global weirding videos, which could potentially be useful for the students as well as the teachers.
Awesome. And what we can do, everyone, is we can send, if Dan has the time and capacity, we can send some of these leftover questions to him and see if he can't answer them at another time, and pass those answers along to you. And again, Craig is going to be, or AJ is going to be sending out these slides, so you'll have access to all those resources that he did include. Thanks for answering all those questions, Dan. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. I'd be happy to try to answer some others afterwards and follow up.
And I will say, a lot of people said, would you be willing to come or to speak at a family or parent night, or once field trips are back up and running, if you would be willing to do that. So you got a lot of interest, and we'll be bugging you again in the near future.
Oh, I think Mackenzie might have frozen. Or is that me?
Oh, that might have been you. No, she's not frozen. Yeah, I don't even think I put my email on that last slide, but hopefully we can make sure you guys have my contact information if you do want to get in touch with me, because as I mentioned, a big part of the WRCC side of this is outreach and education. So I'm happy to do as much as I can, and this was a lot of fun. And thank you, Craig and Mackenzie and AJ and everyone else for hosting this and inviting me to do it. It was great.
Thanks, Dan. And thanks everyone for coming. Just a few points, you guys, before we do the raffle, which we're about to do, and you have to be present to win. There is a very short, 5-question survey in the chat box. If you could click on that and fill that out. And then also for attendance, there's about 10 people that have names that I'm having a hard time matching to your registration. So either you can email me what your Zoom name was, or you can go ahead and change it because it spits out a report at the end. And our raffle today, our winner is, and I just do this at random on an Excel sheet because it's so fun. It is, dun, 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 here it comes, Sonia Foster. I think I saw her. Can you show yourself and wave? Let's see, where is she? Hi, Sonia. All right.
Sonia, congratulations.
Congratulations. I will send you a link so you can send me your address, and we will send you a gift card to Amazon so you can shop from home.
Hey, it was great having you all here this afternoon. And again, big thanks to Dan and to Mackenzie for fielding all those questions. And thanks, AJ, for setting all this up for us, and to all the DRI staff who've been working in the background, making this happen. Tomorrow, we will continue with part 2. So we set up the problem today. We talked about climate change as the issue. Tomorrow, we're going to move into solutions. We have 3 special guest presenters. We have someone representing the Governor's Office of Energy who will be here, Jen Taylor, who will be here to showcase some of the work that she's doing on behalf of the state, as well as representatives from NV Energy and Southwest Gas to address how they are doing addressing climate change through energy consumption and production and conservation. So we look forward to seeing you back here tomorrow, same bat time, different bat channel. Have a great afternoon. Cheers, everyone. Make sure you take time to fill out that survey.
See you later, Craig.
Bye, Jessica.
Bye.
Thanks, Teresa, for the applause. We saw it. Appreciate it. Thank you all for taking time to fill out that survey. We really appreciate it. Audrey, maybe we could send a different survey link out to Audrey so she can try and connect. Thank you for trying. We appreciate it. Be safe out there in Tonopah. Great to have you here, though. Okay, I think most of you have the actual link to the survey, so we're going to go ahead and close this meeting. Again, thank you so much, and we'll see you all tomorrow.
Thanks, Craig. Thanks, teachers.
Bye.